Our next speaker is the Honorary Associate Professor Tony Irwin. Please come up here, Tony. Tony has over 30 years of experience in the UK civilian nuclear industry, where he was involved in commissioning and operating 8 nuclear power plants. That's a pretty good effort. After moving to Australia, he joined ANSTO, where he, after doing various things, became the Opal Reactor's first reactor manager. He's a consultant now, an honorary associate professor at the ANU, and also the chair of Engineer Australia's nuclear engineering panel. So this is also a very topical topic, good use of English, at the moment. And he's going to talk to us about what's being done around the world to replace Russian supplied enriched uranium.
Thank you, Joe. So we've talked a lot about reactors, but of course what they need is the fuel. So this is the nuclear fuel cycle. So this is the main process: mining, conversion, enrichment, fuel fabrication, throw it in the reactor, bring it out, can reprocess it or just dispose of it. So if we don't reprocess it, it's an open cycle. If we reprocess it, we can have a closed cycle there. So we're going to concentrate on the front end of this cycle up to the reactor. So no country is self-sufficient within its own country in all aspects of the fuel cycle. Oh, wait a minute, you say, what about Canada? And Canada, yes, it is, because they've managed to bypass the enrichment part of it. So they are self-sufficient. But not every country wants to be self-sufficient. The US gets very nervous about enrichment and reprocessing. And we heard about the UAE. So the UAE declared when they started their program that they wouldn't enrich and they wouldn't reprocess. So the US were very happy about that. So we've got lots of drivers now for the nuclear fuel cycle. We're replacing Russian supplies. So in February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. People didn't want Russian supplies anymore, so they've been trying to get out of them. Lots of people have got long-term contracts, so it takes quite a while to get out of that. Reactor shutdowns delayed, reactor restarts. We've seen Palisades, 3 Mile Island, restarts. Lots of reactor life extensions. So 88 reactors in the US have approval for 20-year extensions. And the first ones now have got approval for 80 years. So Turkey Point 3 and 4 now can work for 80 years. New builds, 67 under construction, including 31 in China. Japan restarting, and Japan's also going in for life extensions as well. The US Inflation Reduction Acts, that's put a lot of money into fuel cycle as well. And Cameco now own Westinghouse. So this is a big opportunity for Cameco to extend into other parts of the fuel cycle. And then if you look at that IAEA recent report, 950 gigawatts of global nuclear capacity by 2050, currently 395. So a huge increase in that. So how much is Russia involved at the moment? Well, you can see it's a very big part of the fuel supply, particularly enrichments. So Western nuclear fuel markets are being highly dependent on Russia fuel supply, particularly the USE. So there's an urgency to find alternative supplies. So we start with mining. So uranium, relatively abundant, 500 times gold. There's 3.7 million tons in the Earth's crust. And if we get too short of that, there's 4 billion tons in seawater. And ANSTO have been doing some interesting work with the UNSW on getting uranium out of seawater. And of course, you've got no tailings then, so that's quite a nice advantage of that system. Open pit underground used to be the very main way, but ISL in situ leach has overtaken that now, and that's the majority of mining now. Byproducts, big example in Australia, of course, Olympic Dam, big copper mine just happens to produce huge amounts of uranium, silver and gold, etc. And then it goes for milling. So you've got to extract the uranium from the ore by leaching, precipitation, drying, transporting in drums, and that's usually done very close to the mine site. Post Fukushima, the price for uranium really plunged. It was no longer economic for some mines to operate, but particularly post the Ukraine invasion, prices have really gone up. Today's spot is about $83 a pound, so that makes it very worthwhile for a lot of mining. So the blue is production, and the red is requirements. So what we can see is that many users of uranium aren't producers, and many producers are not users. So it's only really Canada that produces enough uranium to supply their domestic requirements. We've seen Kazakhstan. Interestingly, this week, there was the referendum in Kazakhstan. So they were asked, do you agree with the construction of a nuclear power plant in Kazakhstan? And 70% answered yes. And I think if we did the same in Australia, we get about the same answer, actually. China's aiming for 1/3 domestic, 1/3 through foreign equity and mines, and 1/3 on the open market. 56 operating reactors, but they also need, of course, the first loads for the new reactors. And the US is getting back into mining. They, they're the major purchaser of uranium. 94 reactors, 97 gigawatts there. France, other major purchaser, 56 reactors, 54 gigawatts of power. So US has decided they really ought to get back into mining. So who's got the most? Well, Australia's got twice as much as any other country. That red book is the Bible for uranium resources, now available for download. Hasn't been, but the latest edition is. So that's really useful. So those are the countries, but the actual mined output, the production from mines, Kazakhstan has really been the outstanding producer. Canada will increase this year, so 7,000, that was 2022, but we'll be back to over 14,000, so it'll be back in second place. It was the largest producer until 2009. Namibia also expects to double their output, so they've got a big drilling programs, etc. This is a very useful report. So this is the Australian Department of Industry, Science and Resources, and they produce this very useful quarterly report. And looking at world uranium production, the black dots are the demand, and the purple is secondary supplies, and below that is the output from the mines. So secondary supplies, downblended, HEU, tails, re-enrichment, inventories. So post Fukushima, there was a big slump in the uranium prices. Kazakhstan shut down, cut back. Canada shut down the world's largest uranium mine, MacArthur River, in 2018. And you can see it's now coming back into operation. There was also problems in Canada with shutdowns due to COVID as well. Kazakhstan increasing again, but all theirs is ISL, and they've got acid shortages, so that's been a bit of a problem. This is another graph from the Resources and Energy Quarterly. So post Fukushima, we can see the big slump, and now recovering to greater than $80 a pound. Uranium's always in pounds, not kgs. It's a sort of historical. And so the spot is around the 83 at the moment. Australia's uranium exports hit a low after Ranger was shut down, but are now increasing, and Honeymoon has reopened. And there's big opportunities for Western Australia. There's Mulga Rock, Cauldron Energy at Yanray, Wiluna, Kintyre, etc. So a lot of more of exploration. And Honeymoon have restarted. Yay. So this was great. So Honeymoon was owned by Russia, Uranium One, acquired by Boss Resources in 2015. And this is an ANSTO success story because they helped to develop the new ion exchange units for this. So they've now restarted, and the first drum was exported in July this year. So we've got another mine. So this is the operating power reactors in the world, and you can see that the pressurized water reactor and boiling water reactors are the major reactors. And the important thing to notice here, there's only 48 pressurized heavy water reactors. These are the only ones that use natural uranium. So everything else has got to have enriched uranium. And if we look at under construction, it's exactly the same. So domination of PWRs and BWRs, and a small number of pressurized heavy water reactors. So we've got to go through enrichment. So the first thing we've got to do is to get it into a gaseous form, because it's very hard to separate the isotopes chemically. You've really got to do it mechanically. You've got to use a physical process. So everybody uses UF6. They use UF6 because it's a gas at sort of normal temperatures. You don't have to have very high temperatures to make it into a gas. But if you cool it down to atmospheric temperatures, it then goes solid, which is good for transport. So everybody uses UF6. So it's a pure chemical process, converting UO2, hydrofluoric acid to UF4, and then fluorinate it to UF6. This is the cheapest part of the nuclear fuel cycle, so it's relatively cheap, but even that has increased since the Russian invasion. Three big players in the Western world: Cameco, Converdyne, and Orano. So Converdyne was the only conversion plant in the US, shut down in 2017. It's restarted now, and it's back in operation. France, I think, got their timing really right. They developed the new FIEAust conversion facility at Tricaston, commissioned in 2018. That's the first new one in the world, and that's going ahead. So we've got some more conversion facilities. And in Canada, of course, they don't need the conversion, but Cameco, Blind River, refines the ore and then produces UO2, which goes straight into the fuel. So a big development now is LEU plus and HALEU. So traditionally, reactors and all the enrichment plants were licensed up to 5%, and they worked on LEU. What we're now seeing is reactors want extended life cycle, so longer time operating. Plus, we've started using accident-tolerant fuel, so that absorbs a few more of the neutrons. So you need a little bit more enrichment. So we're now talking about LEU plus. Vogel 2, 1200 Westinghouse PWR, first commercial one authorized for greater than 5%. So that's going to be loaded with that. And then we've got HALEU, which is high assay, low enriched uranium. So all LEU has got a limit of 20%. Above that, it's classed as HEU. We only use up to 20% for civil facilities. So places like Opal is 19.75%. So there's quite a lot of initiatives now to produce HALEU, dedicated facilities, etc. But there's also transport package issues. So this will require different securities and different transport package authorizations. Few other sources of HALEU we've got. There's quite a lot of scrap material at NNSA containing enriched uranium. So BWXT have got a contract to produce HALEU from that. EBR2, the famous integral fast reactor, which a lot of us really loved. Sodium cooled fast reactor shut down in 1994. That had got an on-site pyroprocessing, so it's a complete site, all on site. So they're recovering some of the material from that. So the pyroprocessing's back up and running. And Savannah River, fuel from research reactors. So HEU from HIFAR, from the early reactor, which the US origin went back to the US. And that's been processed at Savannah River and down blended. So that's another useful source. Enrichment. So gaseous diffusion was the original enrichment technology, but very high electricity use, 2,500 kilowatt hours a SWU. So the last one of those was shut down in 2013. That was Paducah. When the US shut down Paducah, they no longer had any enrichment facilities in the US that were their own. Centrifuges taken over, less than 50 kilowatts hours per SWU, so much more efficient. Laser now close to commercial, and still down blended HEU is a big source of it. So again, post Fukushima, big crash in price, but now really back up. A gigawatt's reactor requires about 100,000 SWU a year, so 395 gigawatts present capacity is about 40 million SWU a year, plus startup core as well. Urenco, the major Western enrichment, established 1970 under the Treaty of Almelo by the governments of UK, Netherlands and Germany. Facilities at Capenhurst in the UK, Grono in Germany, Almelo in the Netherlands, Eunice, New Mexico. Even the new George Best plant, the French plant, uses the Urenco technology. So China needs about 10 million SWU a year. Capacity at the moment, probably less, about 7. Originally used Russian technology, but now they've got their own, so they're increasing as well. The Australian success story, the Silex out of Anstow. 3 projects they've got, and really now getting towards commercialization. There's 300,000 tons of depleted uranium at Paducah. So they've got access to that, and they can convert that into effectively natural uranium. Plus they can make LEU, plus they can make HALEU. So with the present state of the market, there's a big acceleration in their program now. And Geordie's here today, I think somewhere. So Silex has got letters of intent in place with 4 of the US utilities, and we're really hoping it's going to be a success. And then we've got to fabricate the fuel. So we start off with this little thing. This is a fuel pellet. It's about the size of your small fingernail. So that goes into fuel rods, and then the fuel rods are arranged as fuel assemblies. So PWR, you've got about 260 rods, 9 million pellets. It's a 4-meter high fuel assembly. Big move now to accident-tolerant fuel. So post-Fukushima, the US have got these programs to get fuel that's more tolerant for accident conditions. So the two main routes are chromium-coated fuel cladding or chromium-doped fuel pellets. And they reduce the zirconium steam reaction and the amount of hydrogen produced in an accident. So up to fuel fabrication, this is a universal product. You know, we've got enriched fuel, but now it's for a particular reactor. Traditionally, the vendor of the reactor was associated with a fuel fabricator, and you stayed with that fuel fabricator. But now it's a very competitive market. Also, of course, there's Russian reactors outside of Russia, and those countries are looking to change away from Russian fuel. So people like Westinghouse are manufacturing VVER fuel, and that's starting to be used. And then, of course, if you reprocess, you've got MOX fuel, mixed oxide fuel, mixture of plutonium, depleted uranium. Not so much of that made. The main one is France. So France, all the fuel from their reactors goes and be reprocessed, and the plutonium immediately goes to the Melox plant and is made into new MOX fuel, which is put back into their reactors. So COP28 at Dubai in December 2023, we've got this triple nuclear. Australia was represented by Minister Bowen, but wouldn't sign this. Now, since the declaration, China has approved 11 new reactors, but the US haven't approved any new ones. China's now got 56. Their proposal is to have 158, so their proposal is to triple. The US really haven't got any plans at the moment. US has got 97 gigawatts at the moment, so to triple that would be 300 gigawatts. So basically 200 new large reactors. So a big program will be needed to meet this tripling. Good development was in September during Climate Week, 14 major global banks, financial institutions supporting this. So that's hopefully a way forward. So the US have got a number of initiatives because they currently import a very large proportion of their uranium and enriched uranium. So we've got the IRA, there's 700 million in there for HALEU. The US Senate have passed the Prohibiting Russian Imports Act, so that effectively bans LEU. You can get a waiver until the 1st of January 2028. What's just happened is that it looks as if China's circumventing the American ban on Russian imports by importing from Russia and then exporting to the US. So the US have just put an extra tariff on uranium from China. They've increased it from 7.5% to 25% to try and slow that down a bit. Nuclear Fuel Security Act, 2.7 billion to establish US conversion enrichment services. And that they've just released this LEU enrichment acquisitions request for proposals. So that's LEU from domestic sources. This is the SAPRO 5. So this is 5 G7 nations which are major players in the nuclear fuel cycle. Created in April 2023 following the Russian invasion. So these members make up half the world's uranium conversion and enrichment capacity. So they're mobilizing 4.2 billion to secure more resilient global nuclear fuel supply chains. So in October 2023, Orano's board of directors approved a 1.8 billion investment to increase the enrichment capacity of the facility in south of France, the Tricastin by 30%. So that's going to be a big increase. UK has actually gone into domestic HALEU production, and Canada, of course, is a big supporter to this with their uranium supply and conversion. So in summary, what we've seen is that there's a number of very large players in this. So there's a lot of international transport, and there's a lot of agreements between countries to make this nuclear fuel cycle work. We've certainly got more mining opportunities in Australia, particularly in Western Australia. ISL is very much the dominant technology. Again, conversion, enrichment, fuel fabrication, all dominated by big players. Big opportunities for Silex, and it'd be really nice if they could come back to Australia and we could have a nuclear fuel cycle as well. But there's certainly has been major moves by all the Western countries to replace the Russian supplies. So nuclear is really a long-term investment. It needs continued political support, and it needs continued international agreements and arrangements to make this whole thing work. Thank you.